will now consider agenda item number 22, a proposed consent cease and desist order to be issued to RMC Pacific Materials LLC, doing business as CEMEX, number CCC-17-CD-02. And at this time, would the alleged violator and its representatives identify themselves for the record? If you could please step to the microphone and identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Julie Carlson, Vice President of Sustainability and Public Affairs for CEMEX Operations in the U.S. and I'm here on behalf of the CEMEX subsidiary, RMC Pacific Materials LLC.
Thank you. And now back to staff. Could you please identify what items are already part of the record and how much time you would like for your presentation and rebuttal?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The record consists of the contents of the staff reports and its attachments, 2 addenda, one of which was distributed last night, one this morning, and both of which were posted on our website. They include letters and statements of support and just a notarized copy of the signature page signed by CEMEX to enable recordation of this agreement. The public documents in the violation file, permit file for this matter, and today's hearing. As for timing, as we will explain, this is a very significant matter and staff would like to be able to take up to a full hour for its presentation.
And there shouldn't have been any ex parte communications, but do any commissioners have any communications that they would like to report? Seeing none, I will now review the rules for this proceeding. Staff has asked for up to 60 minutes for its presentation, so I will also allow the alleged violator the same amount of time, and we will allow 3 minutes for any other party who would like to speak as an interested member of the public, with group presentations of 5 members or more being entitled to 15 minutes. Anyone who speaks at this hearing may propose either orally or in writing questions that they would like the commissioners to ask of any party. We will now begin the public hearing with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Staff is pleased to announce that respondent RMC Pacific Materials LLC, doing business as CEMEX, has worked diligently with staff to reach a resolution of this matter and has agreed to an amicable resolution of this enforcement case through the proposed consent agreement before you today. Before we have the full staff presentation, I just wanted to say a few words to put this matter in perspective. First, I would note the obvious, that the proposed consent settlement addresses long-standing issues that we've been working on for years. Moreover, the operation that is the focus of this hearing is one that has raised issues of concern to many other parties for even longer, as the record reflects. And we are glad to finally have a proposed means of resolving these issues. Second, the settlement provides for a timeline and proposed phase-out of the last coastal sand mine in the United States. It proposes a creative and interlocking resolution that takes into account the strong competing legal and factual positions that have been vigorously advanced both by your own staff and by CEMEX. And it recognizes the ever-increasing need to act to preserve our coast in light of rising seas. Third, I would just note that this is an absolutely unique case and addresses a business that has been around in one form or another for well over a certain century, a time during which we've learned a great deal about the fragility of our coastline and the importance of habitat, the importance of sand supply, the importance of protecting every part of our ecosystem, including endangered species, as well as the importance of the increasing recreational and economic value of our beaches in California. Moreover, we've also become much more aware of and sophisticated about the important role beaches play in protecting our coast, protecting development along the coast, and protecting recreational and access opportunities for all in an age of sea level rise. We believe the settlement strikes a balance and is truly historic in that it provides a cessation of mining here and a concomitant loss of sand. But in addition, as we'll discuss later, it also provides for protection and preservation of this truly remarkable piece of coast in perpetuity, as well as opening it up for public access and creative reuse. The presentation, as I said, will be a little longer than our standard consent presentations, but given the history of the site, the complexity of the technical issues, and the involvement of additional parties, I want to make sure that you were able to make an informed decision. I'd like to point out that staff worked together closely and collaboratively with CEMEX and their representatives, and we greatly appreciate their cooperation and participation in crafting the resolution. Moreover, we've had many other energetic private and public partners here, most significantly the City of Marina and the California State Lands Commission, and a truly active, tenacious, and informed public. We are grateful for the constructive participation of all and hope that the proposed settlement provides a map for the future. We recommend that you issue the proposed consent agreement before you today, and the presentation setting it forth will be given by Justin Burr of the Headquarters Enforcement Staff.
Good morning, Vice Chair Trimble Sanders and members of the Commission. Here in this slide, you can see an aerial photograph of a portion of the property owned by respondent. The main feature there in the foreground is the dredge pond, which we will take a much more in-depth look at later in this presentation. Generally, the core of the matter before you today is the cessation of respondent's mining operation here in the City of Marina. Slide 2, please. As Lisa mentioned, the resolution of this matter represents years of work and resolves an issue that has been of great community concern for decades. This agreement also represents the closure of the only coastal sand mining operation in the United States. Although this is a consent item, we will take a bit of additional time in our presentation today than what is typical to walk through the benefits of this resolution. First, we will take a look at the general location and historical use of the operation. Then we will move on to the impacts of the operation on sand supply and habitat values. And finally, we'll take a look at the enforcement actions taken here and the resolution that was ultimately reached and here before you today for your approval. Slide 3, please. The property is located in the City of Marina and within the world-famous Monterey Bay and directly adjacent to the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Over 3 million tourists visit the Bay's state beaches every year. Slide 4, please. Here, you can see the general outline of the property in yellow. The property is approximately 400 acres, of which approximately 100 acres are currently used for the dredge pond operation. The areas to the north and south of the dredge pond primarily consist of undisturbed coastal dunes. The property to the north is the Martin Dunes, which is owned by the Big Sur Land Trust and managed primarily to conserve the habitat values on the property. Directly adjacent to the south of the property, you can see the Marina Dunes Preserve, owned by the Monterey Peninsula Regional Parks District, which is managed to conserve habitat values and also provides a path for public beach access to the beach. The coastal dunes located on the property are important habitat for many species of native flora and fauna that are adapted to the shifting dune sands environment, including federally threatened species with designated critical habitat contained on the property. Because of the sensitive habitats and species associated with the property, areas of the property constitute ESHA, to which the dredge pond operation has significant impacts, all of which we'll take a look at in further depth later on in this presentation. Slide 5, please. Now we'll take a very brief look at historical mining in Monterey Bay with a closer look at the history of mining on the property. Historically, there were 6 coastal sand mines in Monterey Bay. In the 1980s, all of the mines besides the one currently operated by Respondent were closed by the Army Corps of Engineers when it determined that the coastal sand mines were causing erosion and it stopped issuing permits for the coastal sand mines using drag lines. However, since the dredge pond is located further up on the beach and does not use a drag line to remove sand directly from the surf zone, the Army Corps of Engineers did not assert jurisdiction over the dredge pond operation. Slide 6, please. Now we will take a closer look at the last coastal sand mine in the United States. Sand mining first occurred on the property around 1906, and as you can see here in this picture, granted it's a bit difficult to make out, you can see the version of the sand mining operation as it existed in 1925. At that time, the beach mining operation consisted of a drag line that was attached to the structure you can see there on the upper beach. Also at around that same time, but not seen in the picture here, a rail line was developed on the property from which a drag line shovel attached to a railroad car extracted sand from the dunes in the areas adjacent to the rail line. Slide 7, please. Here, in this 1937 photo, you can get a different perspective of the operation. The beach mining operation is clearly visible on the inland side of the beach, and you can also see the rail line extending out to the beach mining operation, where it can be loaded with sand. Slide 8, please. In this photograph, you can get a better idea of how the rail cars were loaded with sand. This was a separate and distinct portion of the sand mining operation that was located further inland and mined dune sand rather than beach sand. Slide 9, please. In this aerial photograph from 1956, it's clear that the prior beach mining operation had ceased and was no longer on the property. It is unclear why the beach mining operation was terminated at that time, but as we will see in the next few slides, the operation that followed was significantly different than the beach mining operation that existed prior to 1956. Slide 10, please. Sometime around 1960, an inland dredge pond operation commenced on the property. This dredge was installed to extract dune sand via a man-made pond located about a third of a mile inland of the ocean. According to reports, around 1964, extraction with the inland dredge pond ceased when objectionable material was encountered. Other parts of the operation were also expanded around that time, including a facility used to sort wet sand, known as a wet plant, and a facility used to dry and sort sand, known as a dry plant. Slide 11, please. Then, around 1965, a new beach dredge pond operation began without any governmental review or approval. Here you can see the inland dredge pond on the right that was subject of the previous photo. And over on the left, you can see the new beach dredge pond. Although this photo dates back to 1966, the dredge pond mining operation is conducted today in relatively the same place and manner and with similar impacts as it was then. Slide 12, please. From this aerial, you can see the entire operation as it exists today. Starting on the upper left side of the slide, you can see the dredge pond, where the beach sand is extracted via a floating hydraulic dredge. From there, the sand is pumped inland to the wet plant, where the sand is washed and sorted by grain size. From the wet plant, the sand is sent to the dry plant for further processing and ultimately packaged for sale, or is placed in the stockpile areas and used at a later time. A bit later in this presentation, we will take a closer look at the dredge pond's impact on sand supply and resulting erosion. But first, in the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at the main steps in the dredge pond operation. Slide 13, please. Here, you can see the floating dredge, which is approximately 60 feet long and 30 feet wide. The dredge can extract sand to a depth of 30 feet. It has been replaced or substantially modified on at least 3 separate occasions since it was first placed on the beach around 1965. First in the early to mid-1980s, again in 1996, and most recently in late 2016. The version of the dredge you see here in this photo is of the 1996 model. As the dredge pumps sand inland to the wet plant for processing, seawater seeps into the excavated area and the pond grows larger. Slide 14, please. Here you can see a clear image of the wet plant, which, as I mentioned before, is used to wash the sand and separate it by grain size. The water used by the wet plant to wash the sand is sent back towards the beach via an open channel to 2 settling ponds located on the upper beach. Slide 15, please. Here, in the photo on the left, you can see the sand stockpiled for later use, and in the photo on the right is the dry plant. This is where sand that meets needed grain size requirements is sent to be dried. Through this process, the sand is further separated into specific categories according to grain size, mixed with other categories of sand to create a specific product, and then packaged for sale. Based on reporting to the Monterey Bay Air Pollution Control District, the volume of sand extracted to the dredge pond sand mining operation has averaged 293,000 tons per year for the 30-year period of 1986 through 2015. We will now move on to take a look at the impacts caused by this magnitude of sand removal. Slide 16, please. Sand is often overlooked, taken for granted, and not appreciated as a valuable resource that it is. However, more recently, and as it was described in greater detail by Dr. Leslie Ewing, when she gave a presentation to the Commission back in May of this year on sand supply, we have come to better understand the critical role sand plays in regards to climate change, sea level rise, and the future of public access and beach-related recreational activities. For this presentation, we will now take a quick look at how the dredge pond operation impacts sand supply in Monterey Bay. For a much more in-depth look at the specific impacts of the dredge pond operation, a memo prepared by Dr. Ewing is attached as Exhibit 5 to the staff report. We do note that respondent disagrees with some of the conclusions contained within Dr. Ewing's memo and has submitted a separate memo on the causes of beach erosion in southern Monterey Bay, which is attached to the staff report as Exhibit 22. Slide 17, please. Both natural and human activities influence whether or not beaches will erode or accrete. Here, our focus is on the influence the dredge pond operation has on sand supply in Monterey Bay. This operation, which extracts sand directly from the beach, disrupts the natural flow of sand in Monterey Bay. To relate the impacts of sand mining to something many of you are more familiar with, The impacts of sand mining are similar to the impacts of coastal armoring, which reduces the amount of sand not just for the beach in front of the riprap or seawall, but also reduces the amount of sand available to other beaches in the vicinity. Here in this picture, you can see waves washing over the beach, carrying sand into the dredge pond where it's trapped for extraction. But for the dredge pond operation, the pond would be filled and the sand would otherwise eventually be carried up or down coast. Slide 18, please. We'll use the diagram here to provide a better idea of how the dredge pond operation impacts sand supply in Monterey Bay. The diagram depicts the process responsible for the movement of sand and sediment along the coastline, known as longshore transport. Waves that hit the beach at an angle carry sand and gravel up the beach face at an angle, represented here by the blue arrows. Then, when the water washes back, the sediment is carried back down the beach face. This is shown by the green arrows. Through this process, individual particles of sand are moved along the beach in a zigzag pattern, as seen here from the left side of the slide to the right. Slide 19, please. However, when we add the dredge pond to the diagram, denoted here by the blue oval, you can see that sand enters the pond, but nothing is returned to the system, which results in a reduction of sand available to downcoast beaches. Although the blue oval on this diagram may not look all that impressive, hundreds of thousands of tons of sand are trapped and removed from the system annually by the dredge pond operation. Now that we have an idea of the mechanics of how the dredge pond operation intercepts sand and reduces sand supply, let's take a look at some photos of this process in action. Slide 20, please. In the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at how the dredge pond works to trap sand and reduce the availability of sand in Monterey Bay. The filling of the dredge pond with sand typically happens in the winter when the region sees increased storm and swell activity. The next series of slides will show how the dredge pond was filled in the winter of 2015 and 16. Here on this slide, taken in early November, we are looking up coast. The dredge pond is off to the right, and there is a wide beach seaward of the dredge pond. There in the middle of the slide, you can see one of the large anchors used to keep the dredge in place. This anchor will appear in a few of the upcoming slides and will provide a reference point for how the beach changed over the course of the next few months. Slide 21, please. Here in this slide, which was taken just a week later, and after a period of increased wave action, you can see that the width of the beach separating the ocean and the dredge pond has narrowed significantly. Slide 22, please. This slide is looking inland to the dredge pond, and as you can see, just 2 weeks later, due to the water pressure caused by waves overtopping the pond and high tides, a channel has been created and lateral beach access is no longer available. Slide 23, please. In this slide, just taken a few days later, you can see that the width of the beach separating the anchor and the dredge pond from the ocean has decreased further, and the channel connecting the dredge pond to the ocean is beginning to widen. Slide 24, please. And here, less than a week later, the channels continue to expand, and the dredge pond is now connected more directly to the ocean. Slide 25, please. At this point, another 2 weeks later, the ocean and the dredge pond remain directly connected, and what was the dredge pond now is basically a bay. When a connection like this between the ocean and the dredge pond forms, sand moves freely into the pond and can fill it rather quickly. Slide 26, please. The amount of sand transported by waves can completely fill the dredge pond. As seen here in the winter of 2015 and 16, the dredge pond was almost entirely filled with sediment by mid-January. In some cases, depending on the strength and severity of winter storms and associated wave action, the dredge pond can be filled with sand in as little as a day. Because of the removal of sand by the dredge pond and resulting reduction in sand supply, the dunes are more susceptible to wave attack and erode at a higher rate. This dune erosion provides additional sediment to the beach, and although the erosion of the dunes allows the beaches to generally maintain their width, the area of dunes is decreased and the shoreline is moved landward. Based on estimates from scientific reports, dunes in this area are currently eroding about 3 to 6 feet per year. Slide 27, please. This increased level of erosion and landward retreat of the beach and dunes has contributed to impacts to development in the vicinity of the property. As seen here, in February 2016, a water discharge pipe and sewage outfall located seaward of the CEMEX property was undermined by waves and required emergency work to repair. Slide 28, please. Here you can see another example of impacts associated with the increased rate of erosion. This photo shows erosion at Marina State Beach and the undermining of a portion of the public access parking lot. Slide 29, please. The dredge pond operation physically reduces habitat through the creation of the dredge pond, and the increased erosion of dunes associated with the operation also contributes to the removal of valuable and increasingly rare dune habitat. Two of the increasingly rare dune habitats on the property that are impacted by the dredge pond operation are the central foredune and central dune scrub habitats. These habitats are located on the property and support many species of native plants, including the federally designated as threatened Monterey spine flower, which has designated critical habitat on the property. These habitats are also important for many native animal species, including the federally designated as threatened Smith's blue butterfly, shown here in the upper right, which has suitable habitat on the property, and the federally designated as threatened western snowy plover, shown here on the bottom of the slide, for which there is designated critical habitat on the property, including within the dredge pond area. Therefore, areas of the property occupied by central foredune and central dune scrub habitats or occupied by sensitive species constitute ESHA. The photo of the plover seen here was actually taken on the site in March of 2016. Slide 30, please. Views are another protected coastal resource, and the dredge pond operation results in unwanted visual impacts that are inconsistent with the Coastal Act. As you can see here, the dredge pond and associated development clearly alters the natural beach and dune landforms on the property in a manner that is not compatible with the character of the surrounding area. Slide 31, please. Next, we'll take a look at the legal basis for the Commission to issue the agreement before you today. As you have seen, development has occurred and continues to occur on the property, and a CDP has never been issued for the following activities: dredging and extraction of sand, including resulting in the creation of ponds, placement of floating dredges and development associated with the dredges, such as placement and installation of anchors and mooring cables, pipes, a pump station, and other facilities, grading, and changes in the intensity of the use of the property. Changes in intensity of the use of the property include those associated with the implementation of the dredge pond operation and the intensification of extraction operations on the site over time. These are all activities that constitute development as defined in Section 30106 of the Coastal Act and the City of Marina's Certified Implementation Plan. They all occurred on the property without a coastal development permit and occurred within the coastal zone. The activities undertaken by CEMEX clearly constitute development, as that term is defined in both the Coastal Act and the LCP, and are not otherwise exempt from Coastal Act and LCP permitting requirements. And no CDP was issued to authorize the dredge pond operation. Therefore, development occurred that required a permit from the Commission without one having been obtained, and that violated the city's LCP, satisfying both the criteria of Section 308(10A) of the Coastal Act and giving the Commission authority to issue an order. Although Respondent disagrees with these assertions, Respondent has agreed not to contest the Commission's jurisdiction and the issuance of this agreement. Slide 32, please. Respondent has maintained that it has a vested right to continue its mining operation in perpetuity. Generally, the Coastal Act requires anyone undertaking development in the coastal zone to obtain a CDP, but it does provide a series of exemptions for certain types of development and development in certain circumstances. The permitting exemption at the heart of this matter is the one provided by Coastal Act Section 30608. For situations where one has obtained a vested right in a development prior to the effective date of the Coastal Act. However, neither Respondent nor its predecessors in interest ever received confirmation of a vested rights claim as required by the Commission's regulations and pursuant to Section 30608 of the Coastal Act, and no exemptions from the Coastal Act and the LCP's permit requirements apply for the development at issue here. In addition, to have a vested right under the Coastal Act, Respondent would have had all necessary authorizations prior to the effective date of Proposition 20 or the Coastal Act, and at least 4 such missing authorizations have been identified. For a further discussion on permitting requirements, please see pages 13 to 19 of the staff report. Slide 33, please. Due to the extensive history of operations on the property, the age and difficulty of locating potential records on operations, and the multiple agencies with jurisdiction over the property, the extensive investigation conducted by Commission enforcement staff of the sand mining operation to determine whether the dredge pond operation was occurring in violation of the Coastal Act took a significant amount of staff time and perseverance. These investigations included countless letters, calls, and meetings with the property owner and other agencies, an extensive document review, multiple site visits, and comprehensive research and analysis of relevant legal requirements under the Coastal Act and other federal, state, and local laws. On March 15, 2016, via a resolution passed by the City Council of the City of Marina, the city requested the Commission assume primary enforcement responsibility regarding this alleged violation. Just a couple days later, on March 17, 2016, the Executive Director of the Commission issued a notification of intent to commence enforcement proceedings. Negotiations with respondent began in earnest relatively shortly after the mailing of the Notice of Intent letter. The negotiations of this matter have been particularly complex and included many disagreements over fact and law. Things were further complicated by the fact that the dredge pond mining operation has been in place since well prior to the passage of the Coastal Act. Slide 34, please. While negotiations intensified between Commission staff and respondent, often carrying over into the weekends and after midnight on occasion, other agencies and local governments with jurisdiction over the property became more directly involved. On May 16, 2017, the executive officer for the State Lands Commission wrote a letter to respondent stating that the extraction of sand by the dredge pond required a lease, did not have the required lease, and the extraction of sand from the dredge pond without compensation to the state constituted expropriation of public property in violation of the California Constitution. The executive officer of the State Lands Commission further suggested that the sand extraction operation may be a nuisance. Then, on June 6, 2017, the Marina City Council adopted a resolution finding that the dredge pond extraction operation constitutes a public nuisance. At this point in time, it became clear that a global resolution would be necessary to resolve not only the respondents' Coastal Act liabilities, but also those now alleged by the State Lands Commission and the City of Marina. Slide 35, please. Enforcement staff continued to work closely with the respondent to reach an amicable resolution of the alleged Coastal Act violations on the property. And on June 23, 2017, respondent signed the proposed consent agreement that is before you today for approval. Shortly thereafter, the City of Marina and respondent entered into a mutual release and settlement agreement on June 26, 2017 that is contingent on the approval of this agreement. State Lands Commission also reached a proposed settlement agreement with respondent on June 26, 2017. It is also contingent on the approval of this agreement before you today, and it will go before the State Land Commission for approval at their next scheduled hearing on August 17, 2017. The consent agreement before you today will become effective immediately upon your authorization for approval and the execution of the consent agreement by the Executive Director. However, as the City of Marina and State Lands Commission agreements rely on respondents' compliance with the consent agreement, some obligations of the agreement do not take effect until all three of the resolutions have been fully executed. Slide 36, please. The agreement is somewhat complicated, and we will now take a closer look at its terms. Generally, the agreement provides a specific timeline and a plan for the permanent cessation of all sand extraction activities, provides for restoration and reclamation activities, provides for the long-term protection of habitat on the property, provides for the resolution of respondents' liabilities, and it also avoids risks associated with other enforcement options, allowing all parties, including the City of Marina and the State Lands Commission, to avoid the costs, delays, risks, and uncertainties associated with litigation. Now, in the next few slides, we'll take a closer look at how the agreement accomplishes these objectives. Slide 37, please. First, the agreement defines an end date for the removal of sand by the dredge pond operation and puts an absolute limit on the amount of sand that can be removed. This phase-out period requires that all extraction operations shall cease no later than December 31st, 2020. That all extraction operation equipment will be removed no later than December 31st, 2020. And it places a cap on the amount of sand that can be removed over this period at 720,000 tons, with no more than 240,000 tons removed per year. In order to ensure that the extraction limits are closely adhered to, respondent will be required to submit quarterly monitoring reports showing the tonnage extracted. The monitoring report will also include the hours the dredge was operated and the fuel consumption to run the dredge. These metrics will help verify the accuracy of the reporting on tonnage extracted. A third-party monitor will be used to monitor and calibrate the scales for accuracy each quarter. Slide 38, please. Second, after the extraction is ended, there is a second phase called the final removal period that will commence. During this time, respondent will process and sell the remaining on-site stockpiles of mined sand, have the opportunity to train and transition employees, remove the remaining mining equipment, and initiate restoration and reclamation activities. Slide 39, please. Third, and to protect this amazing 400-acre property in perpetuity, the agreement provides for conditions to control the future disposition and use of the property. Under the agreement, respondent has committed to convey fee title of the entire property to a nonprofit or governmental entity or consortium over which the executive director will have approval authority. And commission staff will consult with the city of Marina to determine if the buyer is appropriate. Respondent has further agreed that the sale price of the property will not exceed 80% of the as-is fair market value as appraised. The State Lands Commission has approval authority over the appraisal instructions, and the appraisal will not consider, among other things, the potential value of unmined sand. Slide 40, please. There are a number of provisions in the agreement to protect the property and to ensure that it will be protected in perpetuity, as well as during the phasing out of mining operations. Under the agreement, the future use of the property will generally be limited to conservation, low impact, passive recreation, public access, and public education uses. In order to accomplish this objective, the agreement requires a conservation and public access deed restriction to be recorded at the closing of escrow. To further protect the existing habitat values of the property, respondent has agreed to treat the property as though the deed restriction has been recorded for the remainder of its ownership, aside from those activities addressed by the terms of this agreement. It should be noted that the deed restriction does not terminate existing legal rights, and there are easements associated with the property that will not be impacted by this agreement. Slide 41, please. Finally, this agreement ends the dispute here permanently. To that end, respondent has agreed to withdraw its statement of defense and vested rights claimed permanently, and to waive any and all claims it may have against the Commission, the State Lands Commission, and the City of Marina arising on or before the effective date of the agreement. Also, should respondent not comply with the terms of the agreement provides for significant penalties of $10,000 per day per violation of the agreement. Slide 42, please. In conclusion, this agreement establishes a finite date for the cessation of sand mining from the last coastal sand mine in the United States. It requires restoration and reclamation activities to restore the habitat values of the property, requires the transfer of the property at a reduced purchase price to a nonprofit or governmental entity, and for a deed restriction to be put in place to protect the property that will limit the potential uses of the property to conservation-related purposes, with some public access, low-impact passive recreation, and public education uses allowed. The agreement also avoids risks associated with other enforcement options and provides for monitoring reports and significant penalties for violations of the agreement. The motion for this matter can be found on page 7 of the staff report. This concludes staff presentation, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to turn this back over to Executive Director Ainsworth. I believe that we may be taking a break at this time, but I will leave that to your discretion.
I would suggest, Madam Chair, that we hear from the respondent, CEMEX. They have a short presentation.
Thank you. Now will the alleged violators or its representatives address the commission. You will now have the same amount of time that the staff had, and we had initially stated that that would be up to 60 minutes, but you do not need to take the entire time if you don't need that.
Thank you. I'll take just a few minutes now, and I would like to reserve some for rebuttal.
That will be fine.
Again, my name is Ray Carlson, and I'm here on behalf of CEMEX. We are here to support the recommendation for approval of the consent settlement agreement and cease and desist order. While CEMEX respectfully disagrees with certain aspects of fact and law in this matter, we set aside those disagreements today in the interest of seeking a resolution of this matter. CEMEX has a fundamental commitment to operate responsibly, caring for our employees, communities, and the environment. We believe this agreement honors those commitments. The agreement follows years of discussions during which CEMEX and coastal staff have worked cooperatively and diligently to reach a resolution that respects the interests of this long-running operation's various stakeholders. The Lapis Sand Plant has been in operation on private property for more than 110 years. During that period, the plant has provided jobs for generations of local residents, as well as jobs at companies that supply services and equipment to the plant, along with jobs with its customers. Historically, the plant has served as a landmark for sailors and fishermen. The plant has provided materials for many infrastructure projects and for specialty uses, such as at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Today, the plant's material remains a key component of a unique concrete product specified by Caltrans for use in bridge roadways to enhance safety. We are proud of our employees at Lapis who, like so many before them, ensure the safe and responsible operations of the plant and support preservation of the site's unique dune environment and habitat. CEMEX always strives to be a good neighbor and address the concerns of people in the communities in which we live and operate. This agreement to phase out a century-old sand production operation over an agreed period of time eliminates the uncertainty of all stakeholders surrounding the plant. It allows a transition process that will not unfairly impact the workers, customers, and suppliers who rely on the operation, and does so in an environmentally appropriate manner. We appreciate the collaborative efforts by Commission staff, the State Lands Commission staff, and others with whom CEMEX has worked to reach this resolution. In light of the agreement reached among these parties, CEMEX supports the approval of the consent settlement agreement and cease and desist order. Thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. We actually have a request that we have one public speaker, and so I think what we'll do, and I'm going to look to our council for this, can we open up the public testimony to allow for one public speaker from the city of Marina, the mayor, and then close public comment for a break and then resume it?
Yes, that would be fine.
Great, thank you very much. So we will do that. We will have Mayor Bruce Delgado, the mayor of the city of Marina, and it appears that you have 2 speaker cards, and so you will have a total of 6 minutes, and then we will break for lunch and resume after this with public comment.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Turnbull Sanders, Commission members, Executive Director Ainsworth. My name is Bruce Delgado, Mayor of the City of Marina, and as we are here today, concurrently there's a Regional Water Quality Control Board on which I sit, meeting in the city of Watsonville nearby. So that's why I asked to go before lunch, so I can get back to that meeting. And as you can well imagine, since the CEMEX sand plant is located in Marina, it's important for me to represent our city and support your approval of the proposed settlement agreement cease and desist order. Along with myself, representatives from the city today include Councilwoman Gail Morton, Councilmember David Brown, City Attorney Rob Wellington, and City Manager Lane Long. The proposed cessation of the coastal sand mining era simultaneously in our city limits as well as the United States is appropriate, given that the best available science rigorously supports the conclusion that sand mining is causing significant adverse impacts to our coastal dunes and beaches' erosion rates, sensitive dune natural habitats, and other beneficial coastal uses, such as the coastal access and enjoyment for people living in or visiting California. As one after another scientific study was peer-reviewed and published over decades, the consensus of scientists and other professionals studying this issue is that ongoing sand mining has contributed to the highest coastline erosion rate in California. Here's a brief summary of Marina's involvement. Your staff earlier mentioned a few pieces that I don't need to repeat, but in March 2016, one of those was that your commission issued the notice of intent letter to CEMEX to commence cease and desist enforcement proceedings. Fast forwarding 15 months to June 2017, the City of Marina Council took bold action. with the able assistance of the lawyer, professors, and the talented law students of the Stanford Environmental Law Clinic, and dedicated hard work on the part of our city manager and city attorney, the Marina City Council was provided an extensive staff report, not unlike the size of staff reports and attachments that you often confront. This included a synthesis of scientific studies published on the erosion issue. This synthesis provided by Professor of Geology, Dr. Robert Young. During this duly noticed public hearing in June 2017, with an overflow crowd in attendance, and except for sand plant employees and their representatives, the City Council agreed with the scientific experts on this matter and the vast public majority when we declared that the CEMEX sand mining plant operating constituted a public nuisance. While this decision was vigorously opposed by the CEMEX lawyer, the City Council understood that this declaration of a public nuisance was separate but supportive of your Commission's disagreement with the CEMEX's contention that sand mining status quo here was a vested right. We wanted our action to help abate the erosion impacts and, if possible, support the Commission in your pending enforcement proceedings. After our public nuisance declaration, the City was invited by your quite capable staff attorneys to participate in sidebar negotiations with CEMEX because CEMEX insisted on an ancillary settlement agreement with the city and also one with State Lands Commission in order for CEMEX to bind itself to the parent agreement between your commission and CEMEX. In this regard, the City of Marina is thankful for the opportunity to participate in this process. The CEMEX agreement with Marina has been approved by the City Council, but please note it's conditional upon 1, the approval of the settlement before you today, and 2, the full and continued compliance with that agreement by CEMEX. It's particularly important to the City in its side agreement with CEMEX that it sets forth and has a reference to the following provision in your settlements, section 6.2C. Quote, nothing in this agreement limits the ability of the City of Marina to adopt local coastal program or zoning ordinance amendments, unquote. This is especially important if CEMEX doesn't comply with these agreements. The settlement agreement ordered before you today between Commission and CEMEX is an impressive, comprehensive document. Your staff and CEMEX did a great job negotiating it. It resolves a long-standing dispute, avoids years of expensive litigation of an uncertain conclusion, while it causes the laudable end of mining within 3 years and provides affected workers a 6-year period in which CEMEX can plan for their future employment. The City is pleased that the agreement provides for plant personnel retraining opportunities and transitions. In addition, Marina looks forward to its role to consult with your Commission on the planned transfer of the site to a nonprofit or governmental entity for limited conservation and low-impact passive recreation. The agreement before you today represents the most significant step taken during the last 106 years to address the glaring reality that the only coastal sand mining operation in the United States was exporting our southern Monterey Bay coastline, its dune habitats, and its access and enjoyment for the public. We support your approval because of the benefits I've mentioned and for the fact it will help to relieve the threat of potentially hundreds of lost jobs and tens of millions of dollars on coastal municipal infrastructure were coastal erosion from sand mining to continue unabated. Finally, I'd like to appreciate the dedication of local scientists such as Drs. Gary Griggs and Ed Thornton, coastal and ocean advocacy organizations such as Save Our Stores and Surfriders Foundation, hardworking individual citizens such as Kathy Biala, local and statewide press coverage, CEMEX's recent participation, and the staffs of our respective agencies. Together with your Commission's leadership, we've applied our collective abilities for long-term solutions to our coastline challenges that result from this sand mining. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. For the record, I am Jennifer Lucchesi, Executive Officer of the State Lands Commission. I'm here before you to express my strong support of the subject consent order agreement. As background, the State Lands Commission owns and manages, on behalf of the public trust lands and resources seaward of the ambulatory mean height guideline to the subject location. These public trust resources include sand. The state's ongoing public trust oversight power precludes anyone from acquiring a vested right to harm public trust resources. The Commission believes that the sand mining operation improperly converts state resources for private commercial gain. The Commission also believes that the sand mining operation constitutes a nuisance. CEMEX strongly believes otherwise. On the natural, the impacts of this operation on the public's beaches, recreational values, and the marine and dune environments are apparent. However, if this issue ended up in court, which I have no doubt it will without this consent agreement, the litigation would be incredibly complex, protracted, and without any certainty as to the outcome. Litigation would easily last a decade, with the sand mining operation continuing unregulated. Prosecuting this issue would also be extremely expensive and resource intensive. Given that, the consent agreement before you is a comprehensive, fair, and certain resolution that achieves the important objectives of protecting and enhancing the marine and dune environments and public access in an extremely efficient timeframe. The agreement requires mining operations to end in 3 years, limits the volume of sand extracted in the interim, and requires the preservation of the property's dune habitat while providing public access to the public's tidelands. This agreement also allows for the respectful transition for current employees of the operation to help secure their future and the future of their families. This resolution is anchored on concrete public benefits and represents certainty on an issue that is legally complex. This resolution could not have been reached without the intense collaboration of your enforcement staff, the City of Marina, State Lands Commission staff, and the leadership of Lieutenant Governor of California, Gavin Newsom. I want to acknowledge and thank CEMEX, Brian Borgry, Mike Egan, Dre Carlson, and Bonnie Neely. CEMEX could have lodged a long, painful fight in the courts. Instead, they came to the table with a goal of finding a resolution. It wasn't easy, but I appreciated their commitment to stay engaged and productive throughout the negotiations. All parties worked tirelessly to get where we are before you today, weekends, nights, and even during family vacations. In particular, I want to thank and acknowledge your enforcement team, Lisa, Alex, Justin, Aaron, and John. This was a first for me personally to work at such a detailed level with Lisa and her team. I am convinced that they have not slept in months working towards this resolution. They are professional, committed, unrelenting, and overall dedicated to protecting the public interest and serving the public to the best of their ability. They are the best of public servants. It was also a strong reminder of what our two agencies can accomplish together. In fact, if you will indulge me to digress just for a moment, the legislature, when it passed the Coastal Act, in its infinite wisdom, included Caltrans, the Resources Agency, and the State Lands Commission as ex officio members of the Commission as a means to facilitate effective collaboration. On yesterday's agenda, there were in fact 2 examples of that agency collaboration with Caltrans and state parks. The consent agreement before you is yet another example of the benefits of strong collaboration where our agencies can leverage our unique and distinct but complementary authorities and jurisdictions to protect and advance the public interest. The public trust doctrine founding principles center around the fact that it is an evolving doctrine that adapts and grows as the public's needs and values change. It is the State Lands Commission and the Coastal Commission's responsibility, along with many other agencies, to listen and understand what the public's needs and values are when managing and protecting their lands and resources. Surfrider has used its motto, constant pressure, endlessly applied, when talking about this particular issue. I don't view this as pressure as much as what I hear is the public expressing, reminding, and emphasizing to our agencies, to our decision makers, what the public's needs and values are at this location. I am deeply grateful to the public, the citizen scientists, the professional scientists, legal scholars, and advocates that kept up this pressure, this communication with our staffs and our respective commissions. The State Lands Commission will formally consider our agreement with CEMEX, which is directly tied to the proposed consent agreement, at its August 17th commission meeting. As represented in a press release included in your packet, Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and Chair of the State Lands Commission has expressed his strong support of this agreement, specifically stating the proposal ends the nation's last coastal sand mining operation a milestone that is both significant and symbolic of the value California attaches to its environmental heritage and its commitment to a sustainable future economy. The terms offer a much faster resolution and termination of the beach dredging operations than the alternative of protracted litigation and court hearings with uncertain outcomes. I'm grateful to the staffs at the Coastal Commission and State Lands Commission for their partnership and resolute stance, which have delivered a good result for Monterey County's environment and economy. As described earlier, the proposed settlement agreement between the State Lands Commission and CEMEX is directly intertwined and dependent upon the consent order before you. At the risk of stating the obvious, I will be recommending approval of our settlement agreement to the State Lands Commission at the August meeting. I strongly encourage this commission to approve the consent order before you, and that concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Gail Morton. I serve on the Marina City Council and have been thoroughly involved with the Commission's investigative team and our own attorneys in coming to this agreement that's before you, which the city has already approved. Everybody has summarized the detriment, they've summarized the work that's gone into this settlement. What I just want to re-emphasize to you is that as the city of Marina, our council deliberated, our council had to make the hard decisions, our council accepted the negotiated settlement and its terms, even though it did not give us everything that we wanted. But we understand the risk of protracted litigation. I'm here urging you to agree with us and to approve the negotiated settlement. Its objectives are critical to the economic and livability interests of the city of Marina and of the jurisdictions that are near us on the Monterey Bay and our future. The negotiated terms, most importantly, eliminate the exacerbation of the negative impacts of coastal sand mining on a date certain. It places a burden on the respondent to make corrective efforts for the harm previously done on the coastal environment at its operating site. It looks to preserve the land for conservation, for low impact and passive recreation in perpetuity, an objective very important to the city of Marina and to this geographic area based on our dependency on tourism and the importance of the Monterey Bay and its coastline. And most importantly, it provides a mechanism for enforcement should there be a breach by the respondent in the fulfillment of the obligations. The negotiated settlement again required compromise by all of us. We wanted it to stop today. The 3 years negotiated term to reach agreement with CEMEX, we understand that, and we are accepting of that. We're asking you to accept this with the same vision of compromise for immediate and resolution at a least costly impact to the city of Marina, to the state, to both the Lands Commission and your commission. Approval provides the state of California, this commission, the city of Marina, its neighboring impacted jurisdictions, and the public with a reasonable and certain coastal protection consistent with the Coastal Act as expeditiously as feasible for today and for our future. So please accept this as we did at our Marina City Council. Thank you.
I'm Janet Schreiner. I am an elected member of the board of the Marina Coast Water District, and these comments are not authorized by that board. And one of the things I want to bring to the attention of the Coastal Commission, there had been previously a legal agreement created for this CEMEX property of a use of water of 500 acre-feet per year. And recognizing that some of the other sand mines had closed and sand extraction had increased at the CEMEX site, I was somewhat surprised to learn that there was no reporting to identify trends or ensure that agreement of the 1990s. I'm a great believer in trust, yet verify. So I would add, if possible, to the previous agreements that this water pumping situation also be reported. This erosion that you saw a few slides of was pretty extreme the last 2 years. I don't think the staff made it really clear that that CEMEX box in the picture with the blue pipe is the box of what we call a PCA around town. It's the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency outfall for the sewage of this region. That particular blue pipe is the outflow from the sand well, currently pumping 2,000 gallons per minute. That pipe washed away basically. And the PCA had to review the arming of the sewage outfall in a study that cost our region $200,000. And we don't know yet how much the actual arming and care of that area will cost our community. But sometimes I feel these costs are overlooked in decisions that are made. The service road for the slant well, it runs right along those settling ponds that you saw in one of the pictures. The service road has had bulk kelp and driftwood deposited by winter swash. So I just wanted to give you an image of how close in proximity all these things are between the sand mine, the surf, and this slant well proposal. The test well is already in place, is already impacted by the settlement ponds and the surf. So I would like to support the agreement as written, but I would add a few things if it's possible about water and about monitoring, about longshore transport studies, about reporting requirements that are not only created and required but also enforced. And these CDOs, in my opinion, are one of CalNAM's 22 years already and an extension to 2021. It is very much concerns me that these agreements can be extended without any further modification. So I'd like to keep that in mind.
Hello, my name is Tobias Epstein Villa, field representative for Senator Monty. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of Senator Monty, who sends his regrets that he cannot be here personally to address the commission. Senator Monty applauds the work of the Coastal Commission, the State Lands Commission, the City of Marina, and CEMEX in reaching an agreement for the closure of the Lapis sand plant in Monterey County, the last coastal sand mine in the United States. This action will provide long-term environmental benefits and ensure that the area can be enjoyed by future generations. The work done by all parties involved is commendable, and Senator Monty urges the Commission should approve the closure of the sand plant in the agreement. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Erica Parker with the Office of Assembly Member Mark Stone. On behalf of the Assembly Member, I'd like to read a statement that we previously submitted to you. I applaud the Coastal Commission, the State Lands Commission, and the City of Marina for reaching an agreement with CEMEX. Last year in the Assembly, my Select Committee on Coastal Protection held a hearing on declining sand supplies, and we identified the CEMEX operation as one of the causes we can actually do something about. By phasing out and eventually shutting down the sand mining plant, we can address one of the major causes of beach erosion along our central coast. Thanks to our community's advocacy, sand mining will no longer put our coastal environment at risk in this way, and we will have secured public access to this part of the coast for future generations. I urge the commissioners to honor the work that's been done and approve this important settlement. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Timothy Barrett, and I'm a Monterey City Council member. I'd like to begin by thanking you for taking up this matter, and also to congratulate your staff, the City of Marina representatives, and the representatives of CEMEX who came together for a mutually agreed upon settlement. One of my roles as a City Council member in the City of Monterey is to make sure that publicly funded infrastructure is not put to unnecessary risk or exposed to unnecessary risk. And you have an opportunity to mitigate one of those risks by approving this agreement today. On the Monterey City Council, we've been taking a look at the potential impacts of sea level rise. On March 7th, we issued a letter to the State Lands Commission and to the Coastal Commission asking for, or saying, among other things, that Erosion rates appear to be exacerbated by the CEMEX sand plant located in the city of Marina. And also, the City Council is deeply concerned about the increasing erosion along the Central Coast and urges your agency to do whatever is in its power to cause the cessation of sand mining. That letter was unanimously approved by the Monterey City Council. It's important for me as a City Council member to safeguard our public infrastructure. Through our research and looking at the potential impacts of sea level rise, it's apparent that that infrastructure is at risk and it's exacerbated by the erosion of our beaches. For example, we have a sewage pumping plant that's at risk from erosion of our beaches. We have arterial roadways that are at risk from the erosion of our beaches. And the accretion, allowing the accretion of our beaches, I've heard some estimates say that we can extend the life of our infrastructure by 50 years. And so for that reason alone, and other reasons, of course, I'm here to support the settlement that's been agreed upon. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Matthews, current council member for the city of Santa Cruz and former mayor. I appeared before you about a year ago urging the Coastal Commission to take an aggressive role in enforcement action. I'm very pleased to be back this year with a letter from our current mayor, Cynthia Chase, which I'd like to have entered into the record, and I'll read just a few highlights. Dear California Coastal Commissioners, thank you for continuing to work with the Central Coast community in developing a solution to the ongoing issue of CEMEX sand mining in Marina, California. I strongly encourage the Coastal Commission to support the agreement brought forward to you by your staff to cease these mining activities and put an end to the long-standing destructive activity on the Central Coast. Coastal sand is a precious natural resource. While its seasonal variation has long been known, we now increasingly understand how sensitive the coastal sands are to major disruption by human activity, such as the sustained large-scale mining conducted by CEMEX. Mining results in the depletion of public beaches and adjacent facilities and compromises the health of the coastal marine environment. A robust, dynamic system of coastal sand is a public good. As an essential component of the coastal ecosystem, it supports the environmental health of the entire region, as well as the enjoyment of countless recreational activities by locals and visitors alike. The Santa Cruz community has a long history of commitment and action to protect our coastal resources and promote responsible public access. We greatly appreciate your focused attention to achieve a settlement agreement with CEMEX. We understand the complexity and the challenges. We encourage all of you to support this agreement, signaling an end to sand mining on the Central Coast and assurance for long-term protection of this truly unique environment. Submitted on behalf of Cynthia Chase, Mayor of Santa Cruz. Thank you.
My name is Jeanette Tuitele-Lewis. Us Polynesians, we like our vowels, so my apologies.
Thank you. No need to apologize.
Since 1978, the Big Sur Land Trust has conserved over 40,000 acres throughout Monterey County. We are an adjoining property owner of 125 acres, known as Martin Dunes, immediately north of the CEMEX property, and we also share a border with the Salinas National Wildlife Refuge. The Land Trust has long recognized the critical ecological value of the Monterey Bay Dunes complex and offered a publication in 1992 advocating for the preservation and restoration of key properties along the 12-mile of coastline from the Salinas River to the city of Monterey. Since that time, the Land Trust, along with our park agency partners, have acquired key properties within this stretch. Because of the Land Trust's restoration efforts, the Martin Dunes property is recognized as some of the most highest quality of dunes property in the region. Our successful stewardship and restoration activities have been in partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and have involved community volunteers. For 2 decades, the Land Trust has worked with agencies to help protect beach nesting western snowy plovers. The Martin property can also serve as a model here for quality land stewardship and sensitive coastal dune habitats. We commend the Coastal Commission, staff, CEMEX, the State Lands Commission, and the City of Marina for their hard work in this agreement that clearly emphasizes the long-term habitat conservation with carefully and well-managed public access. Should the Commission approve this agreement, Big Sur Land Trust stands ready to help in whatever way that makes sense to ensure the reuse of this property meets the conditions of this agreement and reflects the community's hopes for this extraordinary property. Thank you for the opportunity to share our comments, and thank you for holding your meeting here in Seaside.
Susan Jordan, the Director of the California Coastal Protection Network. My colleagues and I had identified this CEMEX project as a major problem for the California coast a number of years ago, and one that we were going to engage on. I was not the lead advocacy group on this, but I was kept apprised over the years every step of the way. And I have to say that at times I despaired that this would ever get resolved. First it was getting started, then it was moving forward 2 steps, 1 step back. And so when it finally came to this conclusion, I was absolutely, in some ways, astonished and extremely grateful. And I don't think it would have happened except for the competence, perseverance, and hard work of your enforcement staff. The job they've done on this is, I'm getting goosebumps because it's absolutely remarkable. And working in tandem with the State Lands Commission, these were 2 partners working together. And I just think it's terrific, and I urge its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners and Commissioner staff. My name is Paul Michelle. I'm Superintendent of the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. This federally protected area is one of 13 of our nation's most special ocean and Great Lakes areas, and the largest in the continental U.S. at over 6,000 square miles and 276 miles of California coast from the Marin headlands to Cambria. Designated 25 years ago, this sanctuary protects against oil and gas development, disturbance of the seabed, pollutant discharges, and other threats. We do enforcement, emergency response, permitting, education outreach, and research and monitoring to protect the abundant and diverse wildlife and habitats of the Central Coast. My reason for being here today is to convey a letter of support written to me earlier this week from the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council for the proposed settlement agreement with CEMEX. Our advisory committee, made up 20 different stakeholder groups, local government, and state and federal agencies, passed this letter of support on Monday, and it should be in your addendum packet. The advisory council letter reads as follows. Dear Superintendent Michelle, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council has expressed a great deal of concern over the environmental damage caused by the CEMEX sand mining plant. The Advisory Council recognizes and appreciates the efforts of the California Coastal Commission to negotiate a settlement that will lead to cessation of the sand mining operation and subsequent damage to the marine sanctuary. We encourage follow-through on all elements of this agreement and appropriate due diligence to ensure proper permitting and the restoration and reclamation of this mining site. Members of the public have utilized our public comment opportunities to inform us of significant damages from these mining operations. We have had expert presentations on the severe erosion impacts to the bay and surrounding beaches. This council supports the California Coastal Commission's negotiated phase-out of this beach mining operation that has caused significant beach erosion, habitat loss, property loss, and discharge of pit mine water. We look forward to the required restoration of this habitat. Signed, Margaret P.J. Webb, Sanctuary Advisory Council Chair. And lastly, I would just like to add that the Sanctuary and NOAA very much appreciate and support the work of the Commission and CEMEX on this issue. We're eager to work with our state agency counterparts at CEMEX on needed permits, and we look forward to working with agency partners, communities, and stakeholders on restoration and future use of the site. Thank you.
My name is Ed Thornton. I've been studying coastal processes in southern Monterey Bay for the last 40 years. Included in your staff report, there is a technical memorandum from myself and Bob Guzza down at Scripps, and that's what I want to start summarizing. On the left-hand panel is the sediment budget that I published in the journal Marine Geology in February of this year. And in that sediment budget, we looked at just the sand size, beach size sand. And we looked at the littoral cell from Sand City to the Salinas River. And then did a summary of the inputs and the outputs. The loss of sand is really just the sand mining, and these are in units of times 1,000 meters per year, squared per year, and cubic meters per year. And you can see it's 205,000 cubic meters per year. The incoming is from the Salinas River, some from the south, and the rest is from the erosion of the dunes and the beach, which fall on the beach and then are transported and captured by the mine. This causes anywhere from 2 to 6 feet, more than 6 feet a year. But there's a big uncertainty in the answer, even though these numbers match, suggesting the sand mining is the cause of the erosion, there's a big uncertainty. It was very exciting for me to read the staff report that the actual amounts of sand mining was within 2% of what I estimated. So from a scientist, that simply says that I have high confidence that the reason for the high erosion rates in southern Monterey Bay are due to the CEMEX sand mining, period. On the right-hand panel is a future. This is future based on science. It's based on what has happened in the past when there was very little mining, and it's what we can expect starting when they close the mine. This again is the literal cell from Sand City, the Salinas River. The river input has been diminished over the years because of dams being built on it, but today it has a positive input. There's some from the south, and there's nobody taking sand off the beach. So there will be an excess of sand. This means that I expect the beaches will grow at a rate of about 0.5 meters, it's about 1.5 feet a year in the future. This is positive. The next slide, I was asked by Dr. Phil King to give a very short economic cost of sand mining and the impacts of sand mining. And the impacts include the loss of land, which has been about 6 acres per year due to the sand mining. There's losses due to habitat, impacts on businesses, tourism, and infrastructure. If you look at the numbers, you can see the number of $218 million that would be the impact between now and 2030, or if you stretch it all the way out to 2100, it's almost $750 million. I want to thank the Coastal Commission staff for their diligent work in obtaining this consent agreement. As president of the Monterey Dunes Coalition, I wrote a letter to the Coastal Commission January 23rd, 2009, requesting that they require a permit for the illegal mining of sand by CEMEX. During the intervening 8 years, the request languished until the Coastal Commission was afforded enough staff to address the issue. Since that time, a large number of individuals, environmental groups, in particular, surf riders and Save Our Shores, cities, most particularly the city of Marina, county governments, and the State Land Commission, joined the fight to close the CEMEX mine from spoiling our beaches and dunes. In conclusion, we are in agreement with the terms of the proposed settlement and support the Coastal Commission on signing the agreement.
Thank you. You have approximately 14 and a half minutes remaining.
Thank you. My name is Catherine O'Day. I am the Executive Director of Save Our Shores. We are an organization whose mission is to protect the central coast of California, particularly the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. I'm speaking today on behalf of my organization, its board of directors, and the thousands of constituents who support Save Our Shores throughout Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. I am going to give a very brief presentation here that represents efforts of my organization as well as the Surfrider Foundation, the City of Marina, the Sand Matters Group, Sustainable Marina Organization, and residents who have come out and supported over the last 2 years our efforts to bring public attention to this matter and urge action to efficiently and effectively shut down the CEMEX operation. So as you see here is just the organizations that have been involved for at least 2.5 years. Next slide, please. We worked diligently to get this information out to the public through media exposure. In the years 2016 and 2017, we placed more than 45 news stories to build public awareness, and that those media together had a reach of over 3 million people. Next slide, please. We held many public events, in fact 30 of them in the last 2 years, to inform and provide solutions. I will just run quickly through what you see here in the left upper corner is a sample of many of the showings of the documentary Sand Mine and the number of people who turned out to see that documentary. We had similar numbers come out for a documentary that we made that was specifically about the Marina CEMEX operation. On the right upper hand, on Martin Luther King Day, we protested against the CEMEX operation with over 60 people walking the Mile Beach from the Marina State Beach to the CEMEX operation, carrying Save Our Sand signs, and we, with permission, returned 5 50-pound bags of sand to the offending site at the dredge pond. Below, some of you may recognize, these were rallies that we turned out at previous Coastal Commission meetings, both in Scotts Valley last August and Half Moon Bay last September or October. I'm not quite certain on that date. So next slide, please. Oh, just to note, that was 2,000 participants at those various events. Here, we reached out to many of the local government organizations asking for their support. We testified in front of many city councils, the Board of Supervisors in Monterey and Santa Cruz, and many of them sent letters to both the Coastal Commission and the State Lands Commission on our behalf. Next slide, please. We organized a mine monitoring program throughout 2016 and 2017 so that we could continuously survey the mine for when it went below the mean tide dredge pond and caused, the mean tide line and caused dredge pond breaches. You can see some of us, one of us, Kevin Miller there from Surfrider, taking pictures of the different conditions over the period of this 2-year period. Next slide, please. Our most successful event, I think, was a letter writing and petition campaign that we ran through the month of April. As a result of that campaign, we sent 3,400 signed letters and postcards and a petition, online petition, to the key stakeholders. In fact, at the State Lands Commission meeting in April, we carried a box of these postcards that contained sand from a bag bought again at the Home Depot in Marina of lacustrine sand, and we delivered it personally to Lieutenant Governor Newsom and his fellow commissioners. We then sent the 3,000 plus in boxes to the Coastal Commission, the State Lands Commission, and a box even to Governor Brown. We feel very strongly that this had a large effect on the decision and the ability for the Coastal Commission to negotiate with CEMEX as they realized how much public pressure there were and that there were now 3 different entities looking to take action against them. So next slide, please. As I conclude, I just want to say we are extremely grateful to the efforts of the Coastal Commission enforcement staff, to the State Lands Commission, to the City of Marina, in particular, Mayor Delgado, And we urge you very, very strongly to please approve this settlement. It may not be everything that we hoped to have immediately in place, but it is the right agreement at the right time and avoids serious litigation. And the fact that that land will go into conservation in perpetuity, and that has been written into the settlement, makes the 3-year waiting period when they can continue to take sand more than acceptable for us, because we have the long-term win in mind. Thank you very much, and I urge you, please support this settlement.
Thank you. You now have about 8.5 minutes remaining.
Thank you. My name is Kevin Miller, Chair of the Monterey Chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. Our chapter and our constituents throughout Monterey County have full support for this agreement. And we're grateful, I'm going to borrow a term that Lisa said, for your tenacious staff, for the tremendous amount of work that it must have taken to reach this agreement. We look forward to engaging with the Commission, the City of Marina, and potential buyers while the mine ramps down production and the land ultimately transfers. If this agreement is reached, we're committed to not just walking out the door and declaring the job done. There will be much work to be done in the future to plan for this property, and I believe it has the potential to become another signature project of this commission, and we look forward to helping with this process.
Hi, Jennifer Savage, California Policy Manager for Surfrider Foundation. First of all, thank you to Coastal Commission staff, State Lands Commission staff, the City of Marina, and to CEMEX as well. This settlement is clearly a victory for those who live, work, and play on the Monterey coast. But it also goes far beyond that. As State Lands Commissioner Executive Director Jennifer Lucchese said, Surfrider's motto is constant pressure, endlessly applied. And in a time when our natural resources, marine sanctuaries, and other wilderness areas are under threat, to see the perseverance of a relatively small group of individuals and committed public agencies pay off, well, it's a much-needed reminder and affirmation that it can. Simply commending staff seems like too little. I would like to throw them a parade or something, truly. Surfrider looks forward to celebrating your support of this settlement as a landmark moment in the protection of California's priceless public coast.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Biala, and I'm a resident of Marina. I have been actively involved with the CEMEX sand mining issues for 2+ years now, and it is with great awe that I realize that a final resolution has actually come to pass. I hope that to honor this long and arduous process, this commission will vote unanimously to accept the global settlement. I have been witness to masterful coordination and strategy and dedication of the Coastal Commission's legal team and their consistent reaching out to value and hear the public's concerns and wishes. At the last Marina City Council meeting, I also heard about the last-minute negotiations and perseverance of our city manager, our legal team, and the Marina City Council members to finalize the agreement in multiple closed sessions. The ability of 3 public agencies to work collaboratively, yet pursue entirely different strategies that culminated in this global settlement is quite astounding. The public has participated by speaking up at several Coastal Commission meetings and city councils across the Bay communities, traveling to the State Lands Commission meetings, doing tabling, signing petitions, rallying in support of the Coastal Commission efforts. It has truly been an incredible process to witness, and it is an example of what we all can be capable of when there's a collective will. Of special note, I am deeply appreciative of the work of Lisa Hagee and Justin Bird. This is a historic day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You now have approximately 5.5 minutes remaining.
Hello, my name is Betsy Mitchell, and I'm here representing the Sand Matters Group, and we are a group of Monterey residents. And we are here to urge you to support the agreement and vote yes to approve the agreement as it's written. Also, from the bottom of our hearts, we really want to thank all the effort of the Coastal Commission staff and the staff at CEMEX to come to this agreement for all of our benefits and make it such that our beaches will continue to be as beautiful as they have been for the years that I've always enjoyed them. So, thank you, and vote yes.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Griggs, and I'm a coastal geologist, and I have to admit I've been working on the shoreline of Monterey Bay for half a century. That's with all due respect to Ed Thornton. And I think as a group that's often abused, and our volunteers, you have a unique opportunity to actually make a decision that makes everybody in the room happy, probably makes everybody in the world happy. So I hope you enjoyed that moment. What I want to do is just speak briefly about the science of, let's see here. Okay, we've known for over half a century now that sand in the coast of California moves within distinct littoral cells, which you can think about as big sandboxes. And if we look at those, they were first laid out in Southern California, but they fit most of the California coast. And each of these sandboxes or cells has sources of sand. In California, that's primarily rivers and streams and cliff erosion. There are sinks after it's moved along this coastline by littoral drift. Most of that goes into submarine canyons and sand dunes, but we're in a unique situation here. We actually have sand extracted from the cell by sand mining. Southern Monterey Bay is a distinct cell from northern Monterey Bay. Sand comes down from north of Half Moon Bay, ends up moving along the shoreline down into Monterey Submarine Canyon. Southern Monterey Bay, most of the sand provided today is either from dune erosion or the Salinas River, but most of that sand moves north into the canyon head. And there are these two dams that now take out about 33% of the sand. So what was provided years ago is no longer provided. We've heard historically that there were 3 sand mines in the Marina portion of the bay, 3 in Sand City that extracted somewhere between 200 and 250,000 cubic yards a year. Those numbers are really hard to get your head around. Does that fill up this room or 10 of these rooms? That's 20 to 25,000 dump truck loads a year, if we think about 10 yards per dump truck load. That has led clearly to some erosion issues, and just a couple of examples of that. The hotel in southern Monterey Bay was built back in 1968. Erosion rates there now are about 5 feet per year. So we can see what's happening with progressive retreat of the coastline requiring additional armor. The other good example is the Ocean Harbor House, now condominiums, which is what it looked like in 1974. Bluff erosion at the southern end of the bay is several feet per year, but as you know, that has now been armored to try to keep those apartments or condominiums intact. If we look at the erosion rates around the bay, these little circles, this is done by the sanctuary, the highest rates, 4, 5, 6, 8 feet per year. The red and the yellow circles are up closest to the sand mine. As we get further down into the bay, the rates diminish. But I think this is good evidence that the mine is affecting those sites closer to the mine itself. Something I did actually now 34 years ago after the big winter of '83 when we were looking at erosion. We just took a slice of the shoreline that had been eroded every year on average. So this is taking a stretch 8 miles long, averaging 40 feet in height, average erosion rate. And that produces about 250,000 cubic yards a year of sand that's eroded from the dunes, which happens to be almost exactly the amount that the sand miners have removed. And again, that is a line of dump trucks from the sand mine to Half Moon Bay every year, carrying that sand off of the shoreline. Another way to look at it, because there were questions for years about this pond that was sort of an infinite source of sand that was not coming off the beach. If all of that sand since 1965 had come out of that pit, it would be close to 3,000 feet deep. The pond does continue to fill with sand from the surf zone, and I'll just conclude with saying you can't take 20 to 25,000 dump truck loads of sand off the beach every year and not expect to see the shoreline respond. So I appreciate your attention and wish you well in your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Judy Karras, and I won't be redundant. I just will add that I want to show appreciation to everybody, especially the enforcement staff, for their diligence and researching and collecting the information in order to enable everybody to make very informed decisions today. I just want to reinforce what Jan Schreiner has said about the need for continued monitoring, especially of the erosion, because in case it accelerates, hopefully there would be a mechanism in the future that this could be revisited. Hopefully it will not need to be, but as we observe what's happening in Antarctica with the newly created huge iceberg, there is always a possibility. But I'm sure staff has explored those things, so I just want to say thank you, all of you, everybody, especially the citizen advocates that have been working on this so carefully over the last years.
Hello, my name is Katie Popal, and I'm involved in land conservation and recreation in this community, but today I'm here as a citizen residing in the city of Monterey. I just wanted to take a brief moment to mark this very remarkable moment in time that we find ourselves in by thanking the Commission, the numerous local and national municipalities, agencies, and nonprofits, and the community activists, too many to name right now, but nonetheless essential, who've played an important role in arriving at this settlement. Your actions have made our community an example of how good science, respectful dialogue, and public participation can result in an outcome we can all be proud of. I'm grateful to you and really proud to be part of this community. As we move forward on this project, I just want to underscore that we're all now stewards of an incredibly special environment. Specifically, this particular stretch of the Monterey Bay coastline north of the CEMEX pond has been a stronghold for the western snowy plover. It's critical for the survival of this federally threatened species that we ensure that all future uses maintain this important habitat. It's clear that our community is a stronghold for conservation as well, and I look forward to continuing this effort to make great things happen for our community and coastal resources.
Good afternoon. I'm Bob Coble, and I grew up here in the Monterey Peninsula, served in the Army at Port Orford, and I'm a retired school teacher. Earlier in one of the presentations, I think from the staff, there was mention made about the Soldiers Club at Port Orford. I don't know if any of you ever had the pleasure of going there. Thousands of U.S. soldiers used to go there. Sadly, however, because of the horrible beach erosion and the bluff erosion, it no longer exists. It would have cost way too much to move it and restore it. It's gone now. And many of us who grew up in this area long suspected that the sand mining plant had a great deal of responsibility for that erosion. I'm so thankful that about a year and a half ago, Assemblymember Mark Stone convened a fantastic scientific forum out at the Moss Landing Marine Lab. In fact, two of the scientists who were in that forum have spoken just the past few minutes. And that proved to me beyond any shadow of a doubt of the responsibility that CEMEX had with this coastline. And I'm so happy that you all have gotten together and have gotten CEMEX to stop fighting it and that they're going to be gone. And so I really thank you also for the fact that unlike some of the other state commissions, such as the Public Utility Commission, you represent the people of California and not the big businesses' interest. So thank you very much.
My name is Carol Mayer. I am from Monterey. I am a California and Pacific Ocean lover. I have a question for you first that I was just asked to ask. Am I the last speaker?
We typically don't respond, but this one seems silly not to. You are not the last speaker.
Not? Well, even if I'm not, could I ask everyone that is here supporting this agreement to stand up for 2 seconds? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dear Commissioners, thank you for your dedicated work. Thank you especially for the impressive presentation this morning. Wow, it was a lot of work. I would like to read the mission statement of the California Coastal Commission. Quote, to protect, conserve, restore, and enhance the environment of the California coastline. Today, you will be acting to do just that. That being said, thank you in advance for acting responsibly and helping all of us be good stewards of the magnificent coastline and environment that we are so lucky to have. Thank you again.
Hi, Wes White from Salinas. I started this whole following your guys' path about 6 months ago, about the end of the year. It's wonderful. I was seeing such a battleground thing going on, and now there's just a lot of compromise, and I love that. So thank you very much for all the hard work you've been doing. I feel like a little surfer on a tidal wave coming in to kind of wash things and cleanse things. So I appreciate all the effort you've been doing, and most of the stuff that I've never even seen happen. But obviously it's been tremendous, and you guys should be well patted on the back, and CEMEX too, for actually trying to be responsible and forthright. And hopefully that ends up being among all businesses and among all industries and industries. And we can actually be good stewards to our planet.
Thank you. My name is Bruce Merchant. I'm a Big Sur resident, so I see the coast daily. First of all, thank you so much to the commission, to your staff, to the State Lands Commission, and to Marina, City of Marina, and everyone, and all the citizen organizations that worked for this. How well this works will, of course, depend on how it is enforced and how well it is enforced. I know that there are citizen organizations that can assist with that. That needs to be our attention for the next 3 years and beyond. One question in my mind is whether CEMEX will try to move to some other site fairly close that would also be impactful. That's an open question, not something we can answer today, but something we should keep our eyes on. The other thing is that, of course, we need to make sure that the agreement is followed and that CEMEX does not drag their heels or have second thoughts, and that a good, what do I want to say, that they might face an actual immediate cease and desist order if they try to fight this in the courts or something like that. With regard to the sale of this property once they move off, it was mentioned in the report that the potential value of the sand that could be mined cannot be included in the estimation of the cost. I would say that you should also not allow the estimate of the development costs, potential development value of this property, be considered in that cost as well. It should be treated as a strip of undevelopable land for the purpose of determining the cost of that to whatever organization or agency purchases it. Finally, I'd like to mention that, of course, there are going to be people who have not studied this agreement, who are going to ask why it took so long and whether this is the best deal that we can get. So we will need to provide some explanation to the general public as to why this is a good deal. And I do support it. One other approach that you as the commission can take is to identify other areas along the coast where there are similar or different but issues with impact on the coast, and to move proactively to address those issues, to engage with users of the coast to determine whether some of these additional issues can be resolved without waiting 7 or 10 years. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you. My name is Marco Poner, and I've said everything that I wish to say except for one thing, and that because I had the good fortune of growing up in Colombia, South America, my heart is deeply involved in another process that is momentous and historical, and that is the peace accord that was reached recently between the government of Colombia and the guerrilla. That, in part due to them, is how I happened to come up and live on the Central Coast, because I couldn't live at home. Now I go back and forth between the two countries, and I work in restoration projects in Colombia. I've been 28 years restoring land there, and I volunteer for restoration here in California with a deep love for the coast of California. That includes 11 years ago learning how to surf. And it's a great privilege, and a wonderful place to live. I've been keen on the restoration of the bay itself, the life returning to the bay through projects such as the Elkhorn Slough restoration. And I'd like to commend you ahead of time for approval and commend for all the work that is done, because one of the things that you are doing is ensuring that the public has access, complete access to the coast, and that it's not privatized, it does not belong to corporations that may come from other countries or that are here or whatever. It belongs to the people of California, and it should be free and accessible to all residents and visitors. And that's something that is a model for the whole world. It's a model for Colombia, and I hope to see things such as this Planning Commission also take part in Colombia and preserve the Chocó region there and continue restoration. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to say that there was a lot of public comment this morning and yesterday morning about CalAm, and we didn't address it in our staff report because it's a separate and distinct matter. But if the commission is interested, we could just do 1 or 2 minutes on explaining the relationship between CalAm and the matter before you today. Just before you start deliberating, it might be helpful.
If our council agrees that that's appropriate, I believe we would be amenable to that.
Our counsel is not only amenable, he's the one who's going to be doing the...
Even better. Thank you.
Was that the green light for me to? Thank you.
You got it.
So in terms of the testimony, particularly about CalAm and then more generally about water rights and limitations on water rights, the short answer is simply that this agreement doesn't affect any pre-existing water rights or obligations. And the main reason for that is just that the function of the nature of the matter that's before you today. The proposed order represents the resolution of a particular alleged violation, where your staff identified a violation related to the sand production operation, and the water rights are simply outside the scope of that violation. That said, while it wasn't the primary focus of our efforts, we did take steps to ensure that the status quo is preserved with respect to water rights and obligations, as well as other property rights that CalAm may have on the property that are expressly called out in the agreement, and preserved the status quo with respect to those as well, and any future development that CalAm proposes on the property or anyone else proposes on the property will certainly come before this commission. You'd have an opportunity to review that at the time.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments from the staff?
I just have some closing thoughts and observations. And, first off, this is truly a historic decision that's before you today. In my humble view, and assuming all goes well today, this will be one of the most significant accomplishments in a long list of commission accomplishments in coastal protection. The phase out of the last beach sand mine in the United States, located in an area with some of the highest erosion rates in our state, is just an incredible achievement. And this agreement will preserve some 400 acres of open space, sensitive dune habitat, and scenic viewshed. And it opens up this potential for public access and recreational use of the property, which is really exciting. And the future acquisition of this property will link up over several thousand acres of contiguous open space and critical dune habitat. So I want to thank the entire CEMEX team for their problem-solving approach to negotiations with commission staff. And these negotiations, as has been noted, were long and difficult, and I really appreciate their willingness to come to some reasonable compromises. And we recognize that this was really a difficult business decision for CEMEX to come to. And I also want to thank our state lands commission partner, and also the city of Marina for their partnership in this effort. And also just a big thanks to the environmental advocates and the members of an engaged public who supported and kept the pressure on all of us to make this happen. And finally, I want to thank our enforcement staff for their tireless work and the long negotiations they endured to resolve this case.
And it's been noted they had worked many late nights and weekends working on this case with the CEMEX team. And I'm just so proud to work with such a talented and dedicated enforcement staff. And although they are very few in number, they make up for it with a tenacious and never give up attitude, which I so much appreciate. So big thanks to Lisa Hay, your enforcement chief, Justin Burr, the headquarters enforcement officer, John Delarose, another enforcement officer there, and Aaron McClendon, our headquarters enforcement manager, and finally Alex Helpring, our enforcement attorney, who made this consent order possible. So with that, we turn it over to you for your good judgment on this matter. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing and we'll bring it back to our commissioners for deliberation. And I would like to recognize Commissioner Schallenberger.
Thank you, Vice Chair Turnbull Sanders. It is with pleasure, pride, and relief that I move that the Commission issue consent cease and desist order number CCC, -17-CD-02 pursuant to the staff recommendation and ask for a yes vote.
Commissioner Schallenberger, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would. At the risk of sounding incredibly redundant about so many things that have been said here today, I want to add my voice to thanks for our incredible enforcement staff. And I want to thank CEMEX, because I also know this was a tough place for you to get to, and I so appreciate it. This is really momentous, and I'm just happy to be here to see it. But also to the members of the public who are here, the members who are watching, the members who have been participated and will read about this. I have spent a great deal of time over the last week crunching these numbers and doing everything I can to find a hole in the numbers and why it's actually not a very good deal. And I have to say that would I have liked it a shorter period of time? Of course. But 3 years, given the long, long history and given the cap of the amount of sand that can be taken out, I think is a fairly small price for us to pay in order to let CEMEX close down this operation gracefully and with concern for their employees and their membership of this community. So I think it's all been said many times, but it's worth saying again. Thank you all.
Commissioner Brownsie, to your second.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I think it's fitting that one of the longest serving members would make the motion and that one of the shortest serving members would do the second. And I share many of the sentiments expressed by Commissioner Schallenberger. I feel honored to be part of this in the sense of, like her, I was concerned about the company and what they had been doing and the elements of the order and the agreement appeared to be too long. But when I looked at and read carefully the staff report, listened to the presentation, listened to all of the comments and saw all of the support from the community advocates, and the company's demeanor today, I think, was very illustrative of the buy-in on this compromise. That really struck me. And so, like everybody else, I know it's redundant, but I just want to thank deeply the commission staff for the incredible work that he did. I want to thank the State Lands Commission, CEMEX, and I want to make a special thanks to our public organizations, our environmental advocates. The work that you do is often
so unrecognized and sometimes demeaned as being crazy and out there. But the fact is that it is your motivation and your commitment to not only our California coast today, but to the future that has made all the difference. And so your participation, your visibility, and your articulation today of your support for this agreement was extremely meaningful to me, and I think to others here. And oftentimes compromises are defined as an agreement where nobody is happy. And here I really feel that this is one of those rare compromises that incorporate patience and conflict resolution that we don't often see. And so while this, as Mary, I think, very rightfully said, this was probably an extremely difficult decision for CEMEX, the fact is that I think perhaps it was the city of Marina, the public, the State Lands Commission, the commission, all together, where they said, you know what, it's time. And so while it may not be the perfect compromise, I do think that it is not only historic, but I think that it will hopefully be a model that we can utilize in other big decisions in the futures. And I just want to thank every single person for everything they did to make this come to pass. Thank you.
Are there any other commissioners who would like to speak? Seeing none, is there any unwillingness for a unanimous yes vote? Seeing no unwillingness, we unanimously vote yes to the motion.
And so for you, then, what's it like to be here on this day, 32 years later?
Well, I have to tell you, when they presented the final slide on the cease and desist order, boy, did I get emotional. I was really surprised at how much emotion and excitement this really is, for me. Great, just super.
At what point, I guess, in that time, did you feel like there was momentum for this to actually happen?
Well, I mean, I wrote a letter to the Coastal Commission in 2009 to request requiring a permit to start this off. And it really languished because the Coastal Commission staff didn't have any staff. And that was truly the problem. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that they started staffing up their enforcement agency arm of it so they could pursue this. And at the same time, actually, surf riders came and asked me to join them, and it reinvigorated me. And then Sabre Shores and other people came in. So it's a lot of people involved to get to where we are today. And it took a big group effort. So.
And then for you, as CEMEX, will continue to say, it's not all the coastal erosion in the southern Monterey Bay still isn't entirely our fault. I mean, do you see that as just kind of posturing based on what you know?
My conclusion is it's all CEMEX, period. That's the conclusion. And my projection, as the science goes on, I don't like to really project, but my projection based on what the shoreline was like before there was sand mining. We go back in history, 1910, 1940. The shoreline was accreting, was growing. And so I would expect when they stop sand mining,
because there's still a supply of sand from the Salinas River, that the shoreline will start to grow again. A little bit, not as much, but it will grow again.
So you think we'll see a noticeable change?
We will see changes. Oh, for sure. The erosion will slow and I think it will stop. And there is sea level rise to worry about, but that's the future. But right now, when it stops, the shoreline will start to repair itself fast.
That's all I was going to ask. Anything else you wanted to say? Anything else I should know?
Whoopee!
Yeah. Take care.
Congratulations. Sure. I know this is a little off topic, but they did mention Cal-Am a little bit, some of the slant wells and stuff like that. Do you have any opinion? I know it's preliminarily, but do you have any opinion on that?
Yes.
Did you care to share it?
Okay, they're pulling fresh water out of an aquifer, and that aquifer doesn't belong to them. You know, it's an aquifer. It's a water basin, a Marina water basin that's connected to the Salinas Valley. And so my opinion, just an opinion, you know, it's certainly going to, in some ways, impact those two water.
Those aquifers,
Yeah.
saltwater
It's all
incursions.
one. It's all one. So, yeah.
That's what I figured. Well, listen, sir, congratulations.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.